Today we are going to look at a game played between Fabiano Caruano versus Alireza Firouzja. And this is the sequence of the last video, Caro Kann defense, advanced variation, Tal variation. And the Tal variation goes with h4 and then h5. Now we start with our game. e4, c6, d4, d5, the start of the Caro Kann defense. e5, bishop f5. Nowadays it is the most standard move. The other continuations are knight d7 in the past, and e3 is also being played. We go with our game where bishop f5 was played, h4, and this is the start of the Caro Kann defense Tal variation. Here h5 is the standard move. I have already told you nowadays, but the problem is that white gets full control of this g5 square. In many cases it becomes very poisonous for black, and in this game it also happens the same way. After that, bishop d3 was played. Here white, the other main move is c4 in this variation. If you go for c4, for example, then e6 is being played, and then knight c3. After that, knight to e7, knight g e2, knight d7, and this might be the sequence of the moves, but the course of the game totally changes in it, as white is hitting the center immediately. But in this game territory, when bishop d3 is being played, then white's complete all attack is on the basically king side, this king side. So bishop into d3, the standard move, queen into d3, and queen a5 check. I already told you in the previous video that queen a5 now is nowadays considered the most standard move, and knight d2 is considered the most standard move. I have already told you the reason, that if bishop d2, then queen a6 immediately, and this queen can't move back over here d1. When in knight d2 it may happens, because this knight will come to b3, hitting this queen over here on a5, and when this queen moves over here to a6, then this queen could move to d1. But in this variation, the problem is that the queen would be exchanged immediately. Now here the standard reply is, after knight d2, e6 was played, and here Fabi played the second most common move, and that was the knight e2. The reason behind playing this move, knight e2, was that he wants to have the option of f4 open, and then he may go for knight f3, this knight over here, and then he can play this c4 easily, and this knight will be protecting this d4 pawn. So knight e7 was played, and the standard move was basically here castle. But Fabi, if you have if you have seen Fabi's game, then you may understand that he goes for complexity, complex positions in a game. Sorry. He makes the matters worse, and he's very good at his opening preparation, and he prepared this move b4, and from here the new game starts. From this ninth move, the new game completely starts. Queen a6 was played. The reason behind bringing this queen a5 check and then to queen is a6 to exchange these queens. And the reason behind to play this move b4 was to tuck this queen over here b3 when black plays this move queen a6. This is all the opening preparation by white Fabi. Queen b3 was played and knight f5. Immediately bringing the knight to hit in the center and control these e3 and hitting this d4 pawn. Knight f3 was played. Instead of here, white could have gone for f4 also. But do you understand that what is the problem? If he plays the move f4, why he did not go for f4 when he played this move knight e2 to keep this option alive for f4? Do you understand what happens? The thing, there is a very simple tactics in this position, and that is queen into knight check, king into queen, and knight into d4 check. And here black is winning. So knight f3 was played and knight to d7 was played. The thing Alireza Firouzja is doing, he is just developing his pieces to better scares. a4 was played. Immediately a4 was played, hitting this queen. That where are you going to move this queen over here? If he plays the queen, for example, to queen to b6, have you seen what happens? Then bishop d2 develops the bishop, and now again this pawn is being threatened to a5, and then the pawn is going to move at b5, and he may going to play this move first, might be c4, and in one move white is going to castle. So Alireza Firouzja plays the move queen c4, asking white to exchange the queens. And here you may exchange the queens, although Fabi played the move bishop d2. But let's see that what happens if we exchange the queens. For example, queen into queen, d into c4, bishop d2, and knight b6. You place the move a5 to say that you should have to leave the defense of this c4 pawn over here, and knight d5. And this was the reason that Fabi did not play the move queen into queen c4, because see, this knight from here to here is more active, and this knight is also very active. This pawn is threatened by this bishop, and he may move this bishop to e7, and then he may castle over here king side, and black has no problems in his position. So to keep the initiative alive in the position, he played the move bishop d2. After that, queen into b3 and c into b3. Now these combination of three pawns is dangerous for the combination of these three pawns of black, and you would see how. f3 f6 was played over here and castle, and now the developing move bishop e7. g3 was played, strengthening this pawn and saying that I am now going to move this knight to somewhere else. Like this maneuver is better for white, to bring this knight to over here on c5. This might be a plan, and this bishop could move over here to e3, and if knight takes, this pawn takes, this rook will be opened on f5. So king f7 was played, manually castling the king. Rook fe1. The reason behind to play this rook fe1 is that I am going to move this knight, might be over here on c3, and this pawn, I am going to take this pawn on f6, and this pawn on d6 will be threatened. So f into e5 by the black himself, and d into e5. Is it possible that knight takes, for example, give the check? But the problem is that knight into knight and then d into e5, you have exchanged your good knight for the bad knight of black. So that's why Fabi played the move d into e5 over here, giving the passed pawn to black. But this passed pawn can be held easily. So rook ac8, black wants to open this diagonal for his rook, and knight f4 was played, protecting this pawn. Now he is going to move this knight from over here to g5, giving the check. Now this knight is free, and bishop could move to over here, and this rook to c1. This is one type of a plan. After that, d4 was played, and I think this was the first mistake of Alireza Firouzja. Instead of it, he should have gone for the development of his pieces first. And that was knight b8, maneuvering the knight. After that, rook ec1, now knight a6, moving this knight from here to here. And if now b5, then again knight b8. The reason behind this maneuver was to provoke white to play this move b5. And when knight had succeeded in it, he went back to knight b8. After bishop into b into c6 and knight into c6 now. Now see, this knight is too much active over here. They were playing a classical game, and I don't know that how he missed this maneuver and this best placement of his knight, Alireza Firouzja. It happens. So after knight f4 and d4, rook ac1 was played. Now here white is better. The reason behind is that all these pieces, these 5 pieces are active, but black's this rook on h8 is just protecting, babysitting this pawn on h5, and this knight has no better squares to go to. This is not a better square. Yes, it might happen that it may come to over here and then to d5. But the problem is that when this knight will exchange, white will double these pawns, and this pawn on d4 will be very weak. c5 was played immediately, as Alireza Firouzja has no choice, and knight d5 was played. A little tactics in the position. So I want you to pause the video and think that what happens if this pawn takes the knight. Think deep. So okay, you might have thought that what happens if this pawn takes knight, then this is the check. And kings to e8, after e into d7, king into d7. The problem is that this knight e5 gives the check. And you can't move this king to over here, because after this knight comes over here, and this bishop comes over here on g5. This bishop is already pinned, and this you are going to lose one of your pieces. That was the reason that you can't take this knight over here. C into b4 was played. Instead of here, it was better to play the move just b6, strengthening this pawn chain. And if knight into e7 and king into e7, then rook c4 and king f7. You see the tension still in the game, and black has still the fight for a draw over here. This was the better continuation instead of c into b4. Now knight into e7 and knight into e7. Now knight b g5 check, and this pawn is going to fall. There was also that after bishop into b4, if we take this pawn immediately, what happens? If white does not give the check over here and take this pawn, it was also okay. The reason behind is that knight comes to d5 and bishop d6, and bishop is at a very good outpost on d6. And now if d3 happens, then rook c d1. This pawn is going to fall sooner or later. Knight g5 check was also a good move. King g6. Rook into rook, rook into c8, knight into e6, knight c6, protecting these both pawns. And this position is equal at present. From here, both the players played extremely well, but at one time, Alireza Firouzja made a blunder. He overestimated his position and lost the game. Let's continue. f4. Strengthening this pawn on e4 and freeing this rook. Basically, the reason behind that playing this move to f4 was that to free this rook from the protection of this e5 pawn. King f5 was played. Knight into g7 check. Black has to give this pawn away. The reason behind is to get his king activated. He can't play passive by protecting this pawn. For example, if he goes for over here, we will just analyze. The problem is that knight g5 check again, king e7, and rook c1. Now white's pieces are more active. Just this bishop is also doing a good job. It is shutting this pawn over here, but black can protect it with a5. If this bishop of white is not good, then this knight of black is also not good. So black played aggressive offensive defense. He did goes for offensive defense. After knight into g7 check, king g6 back first. First it goes back, and after knight e6, king f5. And black is saying that I am going to draw the game if you are going back to g7 again. So knight comes to g5, and now knight c5. Now this knight is very active over here. Knight f7, giving a threat of giving the check on d3 and taking this rook. So king has to move, but king goes back to e6 and knight d6. Now this knight is placed perfectly. and rook g8, threatening this pawn on g6. So king g2, protecting this pawn, and king d5, tucking the king in the center. And here, if you assess the black's position, black king is very active, whereas white king is not so active. Rook b1 was played, going to protect this pawn over here on b3, and knight e4 was played to counter this knight on d3. Knight into e4, king into e4. Till present, the game is completely equal. Even after two moves, the game was completely equal, as white's this bishop was struck, and this knight was doing a very good job protecting these two pawns, one on b4 and second one on d4. Rook c1 was played, wanting to bring the rook on c5 or c4 and hitting these two pawns, or want to bring the rook on c5 and going to hit this pawn over here on b7. King d3 was played, and from here Alireza Firouzja goes very optimistic that his position is so good that he is going to win, but that was not the case. Bishop e1 was played and king e2, and this was the mistake of the game. Instead of where it was better to just give black the move. It just give black a simple move. For example, he plays a5, or he may go for again back to e4. A baiting move, it was better to give white the baiting move. But here, Alireza Firouzja becomes very optimistic and thought that he was winning, and this was the first mistake in the game. After that, e6. You forgot the threat. Fabi said you forgot the threat of this passed pawn, these two passed pawns. d3 was played, and here Fabi went into a long thought and assessed the position correctly, that if he gives away this bishop, these two pawns are going to the 7th rank and one of them is going to be queen, and black can't stop it. There is no way. And after a great thought, he calculated all the variations and he came to the conclusion that these pawns are not stoppable. So he played the move f5, knight d4, and this was the blunder of the game. Instead of here, it was better to go for immediately rook e8. Go for the defense. And after that, a5 and knight d4. Now it was better. First to bring the rook on e8 and then knight to d4. And after bishop into b4, then d2. Bishop into d2, king into d2, and rook f1. Now here, black has the option to draw the game. But after this knight d4 move, that was a blunder. Bishop into b4, d2, bishop into d2, king into d2. As I already Fabi has thought that he's going to give away this bishop. Dark square bishop for this pawn on d6. Rook c5, protecting the pawn from this rank, from 5th rank. Not protecting the pawn from f1, as this was a mistake. Although game is still winning, but it was the rook on c5 is more active, sorry, more active than the rook on f1. So after rook c5, rook e8 was played, but at this time the game is very complicated, but black is white is completely winning over here. Rook e5, king d3. Instead of here, it was better to go immediately for knight c6, hitting this rook over here. And after rook d5 check, then king c2, going after these pawns and going to give away this knight for one of these pawns. And king d3 was a mistake. After that, king f2 first, taking control of king, these squares, e3 and e2. Rook e7 and g4. And these types of this is a very beautiful move. And first, when I was analyzing this game, I was unable to find this move. And this is a tremendous move that I'm going to play this g4, and after you take it, then you have to manage the threat of h pawn also. Not just only f pawn, you are going to manage the threat of h pawn also. And this pawn would be a goner when I play the move king g3. And this was a tremendous move by white to create. There was first one threat, but now there would be two threats. Now see here, h into g4, king g3. Now white has two threats, and this is the beauty of this game, that when you study, when you analyze the Grandmaster's game, you understand these type of beautiful moves, and then you apply them in your games. Rook e8 was played, and after that king into g4 and knight c6. Now it is too late, and now Fabi had calculated it very good over here till here, that if I gives away this rook, still I'm going to make a queen of one of these pawns, and there is no way that black can stop me. So he made the move king f4, and black can't take this rook. For example, if he takes it, king into knight, for example b5 over here, and f6, and these two, one of these pawns are going to be queen. So knight e7 was played, f6, going for the thrust of the connected pawns, knight g6 check, king f5. Still you can't take this rook. Knight h4 check, and king g5. Knight f3 check, and now king f4. Now there are no more checks. Knight d4, and now e7. Once again knight goes back to c6, but no, the game over. f7. Here Alireza Firouzja was very low on time, and he made just a desperate move and designed on the next move. He made the move rook into e7, and after rook d5 check, this is pawn is going to be queen. So Alireza Firouzja here resigned the game. So this was the end of the video. If you like it, kindly subscribe and hit the bell icon button. Thank you very much.